So take it away.
Sure. Thank you and hello everybody. Thank you for joining our panel today. Before we officially start, I will let our panelists make a brief introduction about themselves. So let's start from Greg.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Greg Hemmer. I work at a project called Shardeum. My title is Head of Fundraising and Ecosystem. Shardeum is an EVM-based layer 1, which scales horizontally. Its transaction capacity is relative to the number of validators in the network. So each validator you add to the network increases the amount of transactions it can process per second. We aim to enable no-fee markets. So the transaction price will be the same forever, no matter how many transactions there are. We've raised $26 million in pre-Series A funding, backed by Jsquare, Jane Street, Arrington Capital, and many others. Our mainnet is planned to launch at the end of Q2, and we're co-founded by Nishal Shetty, who's the founder and CEO of the largest centralized exchange in India. Our community is very fast-growing in India, and our mission is to onboard users in emerging markets like India and Nigeria and bring them on-chain to make decentralization accessible to everyone. Thanks so much for being here.
Hello, hello. I'm Dimitri. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Subsquid. Thanks a lot for inviting to the panel. So at Subsquid, we are building a decentralized query engine and a data lake that allows you to handle terabytes and petabytes of data. Currently, we're focused on-chain data, in particular focusing on indexing products that allow us to deliver decentralized and permissionless indexing that is up to 100 times faster than the existing indexing solutions. And the secret sauce is the data lake that allows you to query and extract on-chain data a lot faster and more efficient compared to traditional RPC thing. So in particular, we can scan the Ethereum blockchain in just a few seconds, and you can extract all the information that you really need. With the RPC, that would require you to go through each block and probably would take like hours, if not days. We are currently cover most EVM chains and L2s in the ecosystem, also substrate chains. And in Q1, we also will support Solana, which is hundreds of gigabytes of data and hundreds of terabytes of data. So that proves the scalability of our data lake, which basically grows with the number of nodes in our network.
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm the moderator today. I'm Joanna Liang, the CEO and co-founder of Jsquare. I came into this space and have been doing investment for over 7 years so far. And I co-founded Jsquare Group together with James in early 2021. And so far, we've been managing an AUM of over $150 million in total. And since the money all came from myself and James, so the investment strategy is pretty flexible. So far, we have invested around 70 projects in total, and it's very coincident and lucky that both of the Shardeum and Subsquid are our portfolio companies. And besides, we also invested in companies like CoinList, Renda, and the recent very popular NFT project, Pudgy Penguins, and decentralized compute network, Jensen, and so on and so forth. And so thank you guys for the introduction. And so my first question comes to Greg. So we know that scalability, interoperability has always been the main problems that await to be solved in space. And what's your view of the myriads of L1s, L1s, L2s projects in space? And what's the future structure and landscape look like?
Great question, Joanna. This ecosystem is evolving so fast. The only way to keep up is to spend a majority of your time throughout the day on Twitter to see all the new products launching and what they're building. My wife often gets frustrated with me sometimes when she asks me to hang out with her, and I say I'm busy working, and then she comes in my office and sees them on Twitter. But she doesn't realize that I'm researching all the new projects in this space that are launching every day. There are many new blockchains launching. I think when you look at the space today, you can divide it into monolithic networks and modular networks. On the monolithic side, you have networks like Ethereum and Solana and a few other chains. And on the modular side, you look at networks that are optimizing for one specific function of a blockchain, such as data availability or execution. For example, layer 2s focus on increasing the speed of execution by executing transactions off-chain. But the biggest challenge that remains in the Web3 ecosystem today is how to increase the speed of transaction execution at layer 1. I think the modular networks are a result of not being able to scale at layer 1 and optimizing different functions across different networks. We really need to be able to figure out a way to scale decentralization at layer 1, and that's what Shardeum is focused on. So you have these new networks launching these days, which focus on parallelization, but there are many different ways to parallelize transaction processing. And often you'll hear parallel EVM as a new buzzword, but the way they're parallelizing the transaction processing is by parallelizing transactions across the different cores of the validators in a network. Every validator still verifies every transaction, but they increase the amount of cores of each validator and process transactions in parallel across those cores, which results in vertical scaling, ultimately leading to more centralization. So the biggest challenge that needs to be solved is when blockchains become congested, how do they continue to scale? Most networks today don't have an answer to that problem. They rely on Moore's law and hardware requirements becoming more performant every 2 years, or just ultimately increasing the hardware requirements of the nodes in the network, which is not what Web3 is here for. We're here for decentralization, and so we need to optimize systems to become more scalable as they become more decentralized. That's what we are building at Shardeum. Shardeum is the first layer 1 where each validator in the network processes transactions in parallel while ensuring that every account has a redundancy of 128 validators. So Shardeum's positioning in the ecosystem landscape today is layer 1 optimized for horizontal scaling. But there's a lot of other great products out there, and I think most people don't realize that every blockchain has its own product market fit based on the design choices it makes and the trade-offs it makes. I think layer 2s are really great for app-specific customized networks, such as gaming, or in systems that don't require a lot of censorship resistance. The modular ecosystem is pretty exciting as well. However, there could be some trust assumptions with more centralized data availability networks. And even other networks that are specifically focused on things like execution at layer 1, but less focused on decentralization may be good for like an on-chain order book, but not a global general purpose smart contract platform. Ethereum, when it launched, didn't know that it was going to be the settlement layer, and it has fallen into place as the settlement layer. Solana has become a place for DePIN, and Bitcoin has become a store of value. We're going to continue to see more networks fall into their product market fit based on the design choices of the network.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. So Dima, we just mentioned about the scalability issues that are ways to be solved. And so from your perspective, how does the current solving of scalability changes the data, the infra data landscape?
Yeah, so first of all, Greg mentioned that there are different ways to scale, right? So roughly speaking, there are chains who try to build beefier and more performant nodes like Solana and increase TPS. And another direct direction is where we have a lot of rollups and L2s. So basically, we scale the number of chains, and like right now we can have hundreds of L2s and rollups. And at the end of the day, each of those chains produce information because each of those contribute to the total number of TPS if you count it across the networks. At the end of the day, each user has its presence and the footprint across all these networks, like Solana, Arbitrum, Shardeum, whatever. And in order to get any kind of grip of this data, you really need to have a separate place where you can analyze the historical transactions, where you can extract the historical data, join it across multiple chains. And in particular, for example, if you're building a multi-chain DEX, you would be needing to show transaction history across all the chains in the network. So at the end of the day, we really need a place to put this data in such a way that you can query it efficiently. And the more transactions are produced across on the chain, the more data eventually it becomes, right? So right now we currently have hundreds of terabytes, and we produce probably like tens of terabytes every month. And obviously this requires a dedicated solution so that everything that we've been using before was really meant to be used only for like relatively small data sets that, for example, were produced by Ethereum, which is just like 15 TPS. And this is exactly where we see the future. So instead of relying on the existing solutions like RPCs or Postgres databases, for example, we designed a horizontally scalable data lake that grows with the number of nodes. And it allows you to put pretty much everything that we produce across all this zoo of these chains into a single place and extract only information relevant for the developers. Because out of this ocean of data, normally you would need only like a very tiny piece, but it is very hard to sieve it through like all the millions of blocks of the history. And this is exactly the key purpose of the data lake as we have it right now in Subsquid. And in the future, we see that even more data will be produced through off-chain stuff. For example, even right now, Farcaster doesn't store everything on-chain, but instead they have like a hybrid thing where some information is stored off-chain, some on-chain, and in order to get any understanding of this data, you would rather have this into a single database. And again, for that, we have a performant data lake from where you can have efficient queries, you can build indexers on top of it, you can build interesting applications, and this is exactly the missing infrastructure piece that is often overlooked when people are concentrated only on the scalability of the execution and consensus layer.
Yeah, thanks. So a quick question for Greg. And I see that Shardeum has already built a large ecosystem and community. And so what's your view of the community and ecosystem in terms of different territory and geography?
Yeah, it's really interesting how differently crypto is viewed and used in different countries around the world. But first, I wanted to say it sounds like Jsquare has found alpha in horizontal scaling. You have a horizontal scaling L1 and a horizontal scaling data infrastructure. So looks like horizontal scaling is an important place in the market. You know, decentralization in Web3 is such an exciting industry to be in. This industry is here for decentralization and the vision of building open permissionless systems where you and I can interact with each other on different networks around the world without having any middleman control or have ownership of our interactions and data. The vision of this industry is decentralization, and there's a real problem that Web3 can solve today in different countries around the world. Many of us here in the US don't realize it because most of us are focused on buying Bitcoin and Ethereum and other tokens and holding them for profit. But in countries like Nigeria, where they're facing 26% annual inflation, there's a real opportunity to solve problems for them. The sad truth is most of these users in emerging markets aren't on-chain. They're using centralized exchanges for cross-border remittances and custodying their crypto. There's a massive opportunity to build blockchains that can bring users in emerging countries on-chain and give them the power of decentralization. But the issue today is that they view on-chain as expensive. Centralization today is cheap and on-chain is expensive, and we need to solve that problem. That's Shardeum's mission, is to enable decentralization for everyone by keeping transaction fees low no matter how many transactions there are with auto-scaling. Another interesting trend in an emerging country is India. Our co-founder built the largest centralized exchange in India. If you've read news about the India ecosystem at all recently, you may be familiar with the TDS tax, which says that anytime you transact with a counterparty, regardless of if the transaction is profitable or not, 1% of that transaction will be taxed. So any transactions on centralized exchanges or any transactions with a counterparty get taxed. So what's everyone doing? They're going on-chain because there's no counterparty on-chain. So on-chain order books are about to have a lot of growth in India. There's a lot of new teams popping up, building on-chain order books while they have this window of opportunity to bring a lot of volume on-chain. So it's really interesting to think about how narrow-focused people in the US and the West can be when today all they look at is coin market cap and what's the next token to pump, while other communities in different emerging markets around the world have actual real-world use cases of Web3 today, and we're really excited to be one of the teams building a product to help advance those ecosystems. Thanks for the great question, Joanna.
Thank you. So my question for you, Dima. So the Ethereum's next big upgrade, Duncan, is coming. And we all know that it will support the layer 2 scaling through proto dunk sharding. And so can you illustrate more about dunk sharding EIP to our customers and to our, and what kind of data challenges it brings about?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So first of all, what is dunk sharding, right? And what is this buzz about? So this new upgrade introduces a new type of transaction. And this is the first time where the transactions can reference basically an external data. So the idea is that we're currently at a stage where the nodes cannot really store all the information that are needed in order to process the state transitions of the VM machine. So before this, every transaction data, all the things that were ever produced on Ethereum were stored by the network in the full archival nodes. But with the introduction of these blob transactions, basically there is a separation between the execution and the data. This is an inevitable step when you want to scale, to basically separate compute from storage and compute from the data. And that would mean that a lot more data are going to be moved around the network, but at the same time, it will be unretrievable from the network after some time. And again, it basically emphasizes how it is important to have a separate data layer in order to be able to accommodate all this basically short-lived pieces of data that are nevertheless very important to any kind of indexing or applications.
Thanks. So one last question. Since there are a lot of new concepts and the money is flooding into some new areas like crypto AI, DePIN, BTC L2s, and so on. And so, what are you most excited about in terms of the areas and verticals that could potentially bring mass adoption to our industry?
Yeah. In 20 seconds, I'm excited about new founders entering this space and finding problems to solve that billions of people face and verifying those problems exist and then building decentralized solutions for them. To build real-world use cases of decentralization that apply to billions of people worldwide. I do think DePIN is a very exciting category of products. A friend of mine built a Web2 project where he hired his friends to drive all around the US, and he tracked the cell signal on their cell phone. And he discovered where all the dead spots were in the US, and built cell towers there and started renting them out to the cellular networks. And that was pretty successful, but it was really hard to scale worldwide because, how do you collect all this cell data worldwide? This is what DeepIn can do, is help scale these decentralized infrastructure networks quickly by rewarding users with tokens and coordinating global communities. So I think we're going to see a lot more growth in DeepIn, and we hope we can bring more DeepIn projects to the EVM ecosystem.
Yeah, I think we are really out of time, so I could just say socials. I am very bullish on socials, in particular on Verbcast and Farcaster.
Need more frames.
Very more frames.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody, and thanks for your listening. And
Thanks a lot, Dimitri. Thanks, Joanna.